Tomb S-24 remained sealed for 4,500 years. Its owner was not a pharaoh, and what lay inside him was not made by human hands. You are looking at the largest archaeological site in Egypt, a city of the dead stretching for almost 9 kilometers. For centuries we thought we had found all its secrets. We were wrong. In 2023, Dr. Eris Thorne's team was mapping what official records called an empty sector, a patch of sand and rock ignored for 100 years. But their ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly, a void 15 meters down. They dug for 6 weeks in the punishing sun, their hands blistered, their hope fading. And then they hit stone. It was a mastaba, a flat-roofed tomb. But it was different. No grand entrance, no hieroglyphs proclaiming the name of a king. But the official story is that this tomb belonged to a minor court official. But there is no record of his name anywhere. And here's where the narrative begins to unravel. The team drilled a small hole for a micro camera, a standard procedure. They expected to see pottery, faded paintings, a simple wooden coffin. Instead, they saw a single sarcophagus. It was carved from a solid block of basalt, a stone so hard it defies the copper tools of the Old Kingdom. And it was completely black, unadorned, silent. Think about that. In a culture obsessed with status and the afterlife, someone chose to be forgotten, or someone wanted to hide. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities wanted the site closed. The find was too irregular, too far outside of established knowledge. They classified 3 of Dr. Thorne's initial reports. Those reports have never been made public, until now. We obtained the initial sonar scans of the sarcophagus interior. What you are about to see is not supposed to exist. Inside the mummy's chest cavity, where the heart should be, was a dense object. It measured 8.2 centimeters across. It was a mesh of interlocking parts. The scans revealed gears thinner than papyrus, tubes of spun electrum, and a central power source made of a crystal they could not identify. It was a machine. Intricate, precise, impossible. This level of microengineering wasn't developed until the 20th century. Yet here it was, resting inside a man who died 2 millennia before the Roman Empire was even founded. After weeks of negotiation, Thorne's team was finally granted permission to open it. The air in the chamber was stale with the dust of ages. On the team gathered. The winch groaned as it lifted the 4-ton lid. They expected to find the object silent, dormant for millennia. But as the first light hit it, a faint hum began, and then a single, steady beat echoed in the 4,500-year-old silence. For the team inside Tomb S-24, time itself seemed to stop. Imagine it, the dust of millennia hanging in the air, and the sound of a living pulse coming from a stone sarcophagus. Dr. Thorne's audio technician recorded the signal. It wasn't the wet, organic flutter of a human heart. It was a perfect sine wave, pulsing at exactly 60 beats per minute, a modern, healthy resting heart rate. This sound was technically clean. Too clean. To understand how impossible this is, you first need to understand what the Egyptians truly knew about the human body. They were not primitive, they were masters of observation. The primary source for their medical knowledge is the Ebers Papyrus, dated to 1550 BCE. It contains over 700 remedies for everything from digestive trouble to crocodile bites. Think of it as their medical textbook, a textbook that also included magical spells to ward off demons. But another older text tells a different story. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is all business. It describes 48 cases of trauma, mostly battlefield injuries. It shows a rational, systematic approach. Examination, diagnosis, treatment. They could identify and treat dislocated jaws. They could stitch deep wounds with needles made of bone. They set fractured limbs with splints of bark and linen so perfectly that the bones healed straight. They even performed brain surgery. It's a procedure called trepanation, drilling a hole into the skull to relieve pressure. We have found skulls from this period with smooth, healed bone around the hole. This means the patient survived for weeks, months, sometimes years. And here is where the official story gets strange. The Egyptians gained this incredible anatomical knowledge from one source: mummification. To prepare a body for the afterlife, they would remove the brain through the nose with a long iron hook. They made an incision in the abdomen, removing the stomach, the liver, the lungs, and the intestines. Each was preserved in its own canopic jar. But one organ was never, ever touched: the heart. In their entire worldview, the heart was the seat of intelligence, emotion, and memory. It was the key to eternity. According to the Book of the Dead, after you died, your heart was weighed on a scale against a single feather from Ma'at, the goddess of truth. If your heart was heavy with sin, it outweighed the feather. And a monster named Ammit devoured it, condemning you to oblivion. To them, the heart wasn't a pump. It was your soul. So you have to ask a very simple question. Why would a culture that considered the heart sacred ever replace one with a machine? The official reports from the Ministry of Antiquities offer no explanation. They focus on the tomb's construction, the basalt sarcophagus, the lack of inscriptions. They avoid the impossible object still beating inside. But Dr. Thorne's team kept working. While the world debated the authenticity of the find, they took a small sample from the mummy's molar. Your teeth are a geological record. The specific isotopes of elements like strontium in your enamel are a direct match to the water you drank as a child. It's a chemical passport tying you to a specific place on Earth. They ran the analysis. Then they ran it again. The results made no sense. The strontium isotope ratios in the mummy's teeth did not match the Nile Valley. They didn't match anywhere in Egypt, or Africa, or the Near East. The man in tomb S24 was not Egyptian. He was a foreigner, buried in a secret, unmarked tomb with technology that shouldn't exist for another 4 millennia. This wasn't a funeral. It was something else, a procedure, a secret operation, and it forces us to ask a much darker question. If this man was an outsider with a machine for a heart, hidden from the world, who was he running from? For weeks that was the question on everyone's lips. But perhaps it's the wrong question. What if he wasn't running from a person or an army, but from something absolute, something you cannot escape, his own death? To understand the answer, you have to look closer at the machine that replaced his heart. Dr. Thorne's team was finally allowed to perform a non-invasive material analysis. The results sent a shockwave through the project. The outer casing of the device is an iridium platinum alloy. This is a metal so dense and corrosion-resistant, we use it today for deep space probes. An alloy not properly isolated and identified on Earth until 1803 by the chemist Smithson Tennant. Think about that for a second. The metal beating in this man's chest was officially discovered the same year the United States purchased Louisiana from France. But the gears inside, they were something else entirely, not metal. They are a carbon silicate polymer, flexible and seemingly self-repairing. And then there was the power source, the crystal. It defied every spectrometer they aimed at it. The official report, which remains classified, notes that the crystal emits a steady, low-level Cherenkov radiation. That's the blue glow you see in the water of a nuclear reactor. Yet this crystal produces no heat, no measurable decay. After 4,500 years, its energy output has not dropped by a single microwatt. This isn't geology. It's a form of physics we do not yet possess. And the secrets were not just in the machine. They were in the man himself. Look here. And the incision on his chest where the device was implanted. It wasn't a cut. Under a microscope, the skin cells are not severed. They are fused. The wound was cauterized at a cellular level by a beam of focused energy. No scar tissue, no sign of infection. A perfect, seamless bond. But here's the part that nobody talks about. The part that Thorne's team almost missed. Standard procedure called for DNA analysis. They took a sample from the mummy's bone marrow, a second from the preserved skin, a third from muscle tissue near the implant. The results came back, and they were impossible. The DNA did not match. Let me say that again. The DNA from the bones belonged to one person. The DNA from the skin, another. The muscle, a third. The man in Tomb S-24 is a biological construct, a chimera I assembled from the parts of at least 3 different human beings. So you have technology that can rewrite a man's biology and a power source that violates physics. What kind of surgical tools would you expect to find? Laser scalpels? Nanobots? In a small linen pouch placed beside the body, they found the surgical kit. It contained 3 sharpened flint knives and a single copper needle. You heard that correctly. Stone Age tools. How can both of these things be true? How can a civilization capable of this use tools that belong in a cave? It makes no sense, unless the primitive tools weren't for the final procedure. They were for the messy work that came before. For weeks, the team worked under one assumption. The device was a heart, a sophisticated pump designed to grant longevity. They were wrong. When the lab technician monitoring the steady 60 beat per minute signal noticed an anomaly. A ghost in the machine. Hidden beneath the primary pulse was a subharmonic frequency, a layer of structured information. It was a data stream, complex, repeating, and it had been broadcasting uninterrupted for 45 centuries. The device wasn't just keeping a body alive, it was a black box, a recorder, and a transmitter. After 3 months of work with a quantum computer in Zurich, they cracked the encryption. They isolated a single, repeating packet of information. A signature. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a name. It was a set of spatial coordinates. But the coordinates don't point to a star in our sky or a location on the surface of our world. When mapped in 3 dimensions, they point to a location deep inside the Earth, a 2,900 kilometers down, the very edge of our planet's liquid outer core. The man in the tomb was not a patient receiving a gift of life. He was a beacon, a living marker planted in the desert. And the thing he was marking was already here. The thing he was marking was already here. For 4,500 years, a signal has pulsed from this tomb, pointing to a secret deep within our world. But this is not the story of what lies beneath. Not yet. This is the story of the man they sent to stand guard. We call him a mummy. The lab reports call him a biological construct, a chimera assembled from 3 separate humans. Think about what that really means. This isn't just data on a screen. It's 3 lives, 3 people who gave up their future for this mission. Who were they? The bones belonged to a man in his late 40s, strong, with healed fractures on his ribs and legs. a soldier, or perhaps a builder. The skin came from someone much younger, a woman whose DNA showed adaptations to extreme heat and sun exposure. And the muscle? A young man, barely 20, on with a genetic marker for extraordinary physical endurance. They were not born, they were built. The history books call this a tomb. But a tomb is for the dead. This man was never meant to die. He was a container, a living machine built to last for an eternity that has not yet ended. So why do we keep using the wrong words? Perhaps because the right ones are too disturbing. And here's the part that changes the entire story. For months, Dr. Thorne's team focused on the high-tech implant and the strange DNA. They missed something small. Right beside the perfectly fused incision on the man's chest, hidden in a fold of preserved skin, was a mark. It's less than 2 millimeters wide. It is not a hieroglyph. It is not a symbol of a god. It's 3 interlocking circles, a personal signature, the artist's mark. Imagine the person who made that symbol. In one hand, they hold a tool that can fuse skin at a cellular level. In the other, a sharpened piece of flint. They are a bridge between 2 worlds, the divine and the dust. They have just combined 3 human beings into an immortal sentinel. An act of creation or an act of profound violence? What must that have felt like? To look down at your work, this person who is not a person, and leave your name, a quiet claim of responsibility hidden for the ages. The team carefully took a microsample from the mark itself. They hoped to find traces of pigment to understand how it was made. They found something else, skin cells. They did not belong to the chimera. They did not match any of the 3 donors. It was a 4th DNA signature, the creator, the surgeon. This 4th genetic line was distinct, and when they ran it through global genealogical databases, they got a match. In fact, they got 1.2 million matches. The signature is not from a lost civilization. It's a common haplogroup found today in people from the Mediterranean all the way to the Indus Valley. The creators didn't vanish. They assimilated. They survived. They had children, and their children had children. Which leads to one final unsettling thought. This incredible, impossible legacy. It isn't just buried under the sand at Saqqara. It's walking among us right now. And how can you be sure that it isn't inside of you? The thought that this impossible legacy could be inside you. But the answer isn't found by looking at your own DNA. The real legacy isn't biological. It's a way of thinking. For months, the world focused on the object, the mechanical heart, the iridium platinum alloy, the physics-defying crystal, the chimera built from 3 separate people. The global debate centered on 2 questions. What is it, and how was it made? But those are the wrong questions. The only question that matters is the one nobody seems to be asking. Why? Why go to such extraordinary lengths? To build an immortal sentinel, to hide him in an unmarked tomb, and to send a message that wouldn't be received for 45 centuries. The signal points 2,900 kilometers down to the edge of the Earth's liquid outer core, a place of unimaginable pressure and heat. We interpret this as a warning, a threat, or perhaps a map to a hidden power source. But what if it's none of those things? Think about it. They didn't leave a weapon. They didn't leave an engine or a set of instructions. They left a single, steady pulse, a heartbeat, the most universal symbol of life we have. We measure our own advancement by our tools, by our speed, by what we can build and what we can destroy in a single afternoon. Their technology was on a completely different plane. They could fuse skin at a cellular level. They could assemble life. And yet, what did they do with that power? They created a monument to patience, a project designed not for one lifetime, but for 200 generations. This is the part of the story that gets ignored. And their most profound technology wasn't the heart or the DNA splicing. It was their mastery of time. The man in Tomb S24 is not the true wonder. The machine beating in his chest is not the true wonder. The wonder is the audacity of the plan, the sheer, unshakable faith required to begin a conversation that you will not live to hear the answer to. They created something that could only be found by a civilization that had finally learned to listen to the silence. A test of curiosity, not of strength. They weren't leaving a relic of their past. They were planting a seed for our future. Dr. Thorne's team continues to monitor the signal. Governments argue in secret. The world holds its breath. And in the dark of Tomb S24, the pulse continues. 60 beats per minute. A silent clock measuring an age. The true artifact wasn't the object. It was the message it carried. A message not of power, but of perspective. It leaves us